So I think this is my first time going live on YouTube. I've done a lot on Facebook with our church over many years. So I'm just going to jump into this. Many of us within evangelical denominations and leadership have been advocating for many years to fully affirm both LGBTQ plus personhood and marriage. But our leaders and our denominations have resisted. Many well-intentioned pastors recognizing complete exclusion of LGBTQ plus individuals is incompatible with loving all people are now embracing this idea called side B, which they perceive as a middle ground that they think allows the church to accept essentially LGBTQ plus individuals, and in their minds still hold a theology that views sexual relations among people of the same sex as sinful. Now, the term side B, coined over a decade ago by self-identified gay Christians, essentially refers to Christians within the gay community who have chosen to practice their faith while remaining celibate. While I validate the desire for inclusion behind some of these evangelical pastors' actions, I have to be really clear. Straight Christian leaders advocating side B from gay Christians is dangerously hypocritical and a disobedience of the text of the Bible. It is an act of bigotry to mandate side B. It is holding a group we view as the other to a sexual ethic that we do not hold all Christians to within our churches. A few notes I want to make. Number one, this video and the essay that was behind it is not in any way an indictment of side B Christians, nor is that who I'm speaking to. The choice to live side B is done for a variety of reasons. For some, they have done this to honor the perceived prohibition on same sex they think is in the Bible. For others, it's simply to choose peaceful evangelical church community. Side B Christians affirm the sexual identity of LGBTQ plus individuals as God-given, but believe God has led them to choose not to engage in sexual practices. The faith and adherence of these Jesus followers, I have to tell you, is inspiring. One's personal choice to obey side B is beautiful, as any person's choice to be celibate can be. But those identifying as straight, mandating side B is abusive. So at the core of this issue is how we interpret the Bible. So I want to be very clear, as I mentioned up top, I'm on the fully affirming position. I affirm gay marriage. I believe the church needs to completely confront their bigotry on this entire issue. But at the core of this is how we interpret the Bible. Evangelicalism holds to biblical inerrancy, that the Bible is perfect without fault. And a plain reading of the Bible, regardless of its context. So this plain reading sees the Bible as condemning same-sex relations of any kind. That is found in essentially 6 passages, 5 of which have this condemnation in a single sentence, while Romans 1 is a longer but nuanced passage. However, this approach, this plain reading on human sexuality itself is hypocritical and untenable within our churches. Yes, I would actually agree. A plain reading of the text, okay, does condemn same-sex relations of some kind. However, a plain reading of the biblical text also equally condemns divorce and remarriage, any sex outside the bounds of marriage. A plain reading of the text does not allow for second virginity or see beauty in a second marriage. A plain reading of the text says humanity gets one sexual partner for life unless that partner dies, in which case we get to remarry. Yes, the Bible allows divorce in the context of infidelity, Matthew 19:9, and abandonment, 1 Corinthians 7:15, but it does not permit remarriage while one's prior spouse is alive, 1 Corinthians 7:10 through 11. There is some argument in the Bible that early Christians could remarry if their spouse outside Christian faith left them, 1 Corinthians 7:15. But there is no allowance in the Bible for 2 professed Christians divorcing and either one remarrying. Now, this was shocking even in its day, and thus when the disciples expressed shock toward Jesus about this, he looks at them and says, well, they're welcome to choose celibacy for life if they don't like this prohibition on divorce. A plain reading of the Bible advocates marriage for life to one's first sexual partner, and only allows a second sexual partner after the passing of the first. That's it. So, in that way, the Bible certainly advocates for the celibacy of a side B life, but it does so towards all humanity that is outside the bounds of one's first marriage or subsequent marriages after being widowed. That's it. So, in straight evangelicals advocating side B for gay Christians, they are demanding a biblical standard that is not remotely imposed on straight Christians. Now, no mainstream evangelical church advocates that straight adults who lost their virginity before marriage remain single and celibate for life. Nor do these churches advocate that divorced Christians view the divorce of two Christians as possible or permissible. Sorry, I lost my words. Hypocritically, mainstream evangelicalism widely affirms divorce and remarriage for straight Christians and straight marriage after multiple sexual partners, while demanding celibacy now for gay Christians whose sexual acts might be declared wrong in a plain reading. So, of course, this reading of human sexuality, this approach, is extreme and abusive. Of course, the church should not mandate celibacy for life towards all people who've been divorced or been sexually active previously. Of course, the church needs to operate in grace and compassion for all of humanity dealing with divorce and a long history of sexual relationships. Of course, we should not be the sexual police. The New Testament never intended to mandate celibacy for all people who've had sex previously, essentially a sexual death sentence. Within the text, we see a robust argument against rigidly applying rules without kindness and mercy. Matthew 22:40, Romans 2:1-4, 1 Corinthians 10:23. As a Christian leader, and that's who really this video is for, ask yourself, would you ever mandate that a divorced Christian never marry again, even for decades? Of course you wouldn't, because it would be cruel, uncompassionate, unloving, unmerciful. And that's the point. Evangelicalism is using a plain reading of the text to demand biblical adherence of LGBTQ sexuality that it does not hold Christians who identify as straight to. A plain reading of the text on human sexuality is rigid and cruel. We discard this plain reading of the Bible for the majority of Christians, but we demand it for those who identify gay. It is profoundly hypocritical to hold this community to a rigid biblical standard that is not required of straight Christians. Number two, mandating side B adherence is also, quite frankly, unbiblical. The Bible actually has a robust teaching on celibacy. And it is not simply, let me rephrase that. It is simply not presented as something to be mandated, but rather something one is called to on their own conscience by God. Jesus gives a long dissertation about the eunuch, affirming their humanity, saying some are born that way, others made that way essentially through abuse, and finally some choose to live like a eunuch for the sake of the gospel. There is no hint that making someone a eunuch is positive. Rather, Jesus is acknowledging the realities of the broken and violent world of his day. Paul in the New Testament goes on to say that he wishes all of humanity could be celibate, as he is. But that is a calling that not all people have, 1 Corinthians 7:7. Furthermore, Paul discusses sexual lust and strongly advocates one marry and find an outlet for sexual desire rather than remain single celibate, but overwhelmed by lust for sexual contact. 1 Corinthians 7:9. This text has been used within evangelical circles for years to justify early marriage among young straight Christians. It's quite frankly fascinating and odd that we don't consider the same passage toward gay Christians, so it probably has to do with our overarching denial of simply the validity of gay personhood within evangelical circles. The Bible presents celibacy as a very personal theological choice. Celibacy is the preferred biblical lifestyle, not for LGBTQ+, but for all humanity. But it's recognized as difficult and damaging if forced onto someone. And so thus forcing celibacy in the Bible is prohibited. So, in conclusion, this is really difficult for most evangelical leaders, but there is no solution to this question of gay marriage in the church where you can deny the validity of gay marriage, but allow the validity of Christians divorcing and remarriage, or marriage to someone else after sexual activity among Christians. If you hold to a plain reading of the text, if you hold to the rigidity of the text, you pretty much have to denounce both gay marriage, but also divorce and remarriage among Christians. This is a major reason why many of us over the last 20 years have moved to a fully affirming position on gay marriage and LGBTQ personhood. We recognize the inherent brittleness of our former biblical position. In embracing grace toward human sexuality, we have wrestled with hard questions of hypocrisy and bigotry. We recognize that many remarriages are beautiful and they honor God. And many people who were profoundly sexually active before they got married can have a marriage in Christ that is stunningly beautiful. Just as many marriages within the gay community are beautiful and God honoring as well. And this leads one to the covenantal marital ethic pioneered by Christian ethicist David Gushee, which is openly affirming of gay marriage and really confronts our bigotry and brings us back to the heart of the text, which is monogamy and faithfulness and fidelity and mercy and compassion, that is how our sexuality should look like. Side B, mandated lifetime celibacy is not a solution for evangelical leaders wanting to welcome LGBTQ plus Christians into their churches. Straight evangelicals advocating side B is demanding gay Christians adhere to a standard that evangelicalism correctly refuses to place on straight Christians. We have recognized the rigid cruelty of imposing celibacy on divorced Christians or young, unmarried, but prior sexually active Christians. We recognize that the Bible screams for compassion and mercy. But in our bias, we fail to see the cruelty in mandating celibacy to the gay Christian community. The Bible views embracing celibacy for the gospel of Jesus Christ, whatever one's sexuality, as a beautiful personal act. But mandating it on a specific population is bigoted and unbiblical. Thank you.